Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Richard Morco, and this is the Long Hill Report. And as per usual, we have got Steeves with us.
Oh, well.
And we will be discussing where the world is going. And a lot has been happening, a lot of news. People are a little scared and are quite upset that news from Twitter has come out that things might not have been on the up and up. And they've been saving the world from the horror of Trump by refusing to admit the honesty of the Hunter Biden laptop. And supposedly I haven't really heard any of them, there's several tranches of information as to what the people running Twitter security were doing to save the world. And it's coming out, and it isn't pretty, but the people who've been leaving Twitter or been thrown out of Twitter defend it as just the most wonderful thing in the world. And they're going after the journalist Matt Taibbi, who was considered a leftist, and now he's considered the evil spawn of Hitler or something. And he was at a debate in they're called the Monk Debates, I think it's in Toronto, where he defended the proposition that the mainstream media, I believe it was the mainstream media, is not trustworthy. And he won hands down. And I would say anybody who thinks that's a wicked shocker, as we say in Boston, or as they say in Boston, has a problem. And we're going to toss the ball over to Gus to hear his thoughts.
I really don't have anything else to say about that one.
Well, we're going to leave now.
It's over.
But
no, realistically, I mean, that's part of the problem is that we see all of these kinds of things. I mean, I follow a lot of definitely non-mainstream like websites on a pretty regular basis.
I am shocked.
I'm very sure you are. And so it's not a surprise that I get the chance to see a lot of the commentary like what you were referring to. Although I did not specifically read Matt Taibbi's story on it, it's not a surprise. I mean, we knew from years ago that the major tech companies, Google and Twitter and Facebook and all the others, have been for some time basically totally in bed with the Democratic powers that be. And it's not a surprise, unfortunately, that what we saw from 2016, 2020, probably in 2024, we'll probably see it again, is that they will take their own personal attitudes toward our election cycles and take it to try to put the people in power, quite frankly, that make them enough money. And it's what it always comes down to, is making money. And unfortunately, our election system is so rolling in campaign contributions, and I put them in quotes because that's just legalized bribery, that it is. But I think that people are starting to wise up to the fact that it really is legalized bribery, and they have to kind of distract by throwing ideas around about Russian influence or whomever. I think it's interesting that they never actually raise the flag of influence that is corporate. They never raise the flag of influence from other countries, except the ones that happen to be our enemy du jour, Russia or China primarily. Even though there's plenty of evidence to show that our political system is getting a ton of money from several other countries, and that if we were to actually focus the uproar of who is hijacking our election systems, then quite frankly, that's absolutely what they're trying to avoid.
Well, you remember the the Russiagate, when probably the two most repeated words in the hearings and on the nightly news of when people were asked for comment were our democracy,
Right.
which is a joke. It's an oligarchy.
Right.
Probably no system is not an oligarchy eventually, but our system is certainly an oligarchy.
Yep.
That people like that, loathsome Fiona, I shouldn't say that, I could get in trouble, Fiona Hill,
Oh, okay.
LA Democracy in her lovely, up-country Brit accent, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer,
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, our democracy, that they have no shame.
No, they don't.
Have no shame.
They say it because they know that they own it, or
Yeah.
their friends own it. I mean, perfect example to go back to Pelosi and several of the other people that you just mentioned, that you might have noticed that there was a very brief-lived bill in Congress to eliminate the ability of the Congress critters to trade stocks directly.
Yeah,
Of course, that died really fast.
that was a nanosecond until it,
Exactly.
until it sunk beneath the waves.
Exactly. And because that would be like the last kind of reform that they would ever want to do for themselves.
Yeah,
It's a let the peons be controlled. We'll do whatever we want.
of course, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, Cromwell and Sullivan hire them as your lawyers, and they will tell you what to do,
Yeah.
and then they will tell you how to get what you want. One other, departing from that for just a little, anyway, former President Trump kind of jumped the shark for the last time. Now, he was kind of declining. Obviously, he didn't. His troop didn't win in Georgia yesterday,
Right.
but he said, what was done to me was so egregious that we have to abrogate the Constitution.
Right.
And truly, that was not I don't know. People will attack and say he's the stupidest person ever. That was truly dumb. He hasn't
Yeah.
gotten where he is up to this point by not having some shrewdness anyway.
Well,
He
there's
got
between
to-
shrewdness and intelligence,
Well, maybe,
but he's definitely a shrewd player.
But,
He's a well-known, very accomplished con man.
but he,
Carnival Barker.
he said that under these circumstances to abrogate the Constitution. Now, I don't know if anybody else in this room has, but I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Probably was a mistake to sign a dotted line there.
Yeah.
But my enlistment was a certain time period.
Right.
But as I said, the words of what I swore didn't have a time frame. I figure I'm kind of stuck by that. Even though I think the Constitution is a very flawed document.
Yeah.
And the only way I would coup d'etat, I'm not part, would never be part of, but I would love to be part of a constitutional
Convention.
not convention. Well, convention would be crazy. The convention worked in the when the founders did it because it was a small clique, and they could write what they wanted. If we have a constitution or convention and it's open to everybody, you'll have, and in the 125th Amendment, everybody has to change their underwear twice a day. Any nut can get into that. So, but some framework that could go back to my favorite, the Articles of Confederation.
Okay.
But what he did was egregious. But nobody is remembering, Obama said, it's just a piece of paper. And nobody said anything about that. Now, presidents every day, not just Trump, they break the Constitution.
Oh, they do it all the time.
And nobody says anything.
Well, I think the problem is it's not that nobody says anything. It's that the people who say something don't get listened to.
Well, nobody's do it.
I mean, look at how many people were complaining about the fact that the Patriot Act was a blatant violation of the Constitution back in 2002, whichever year it was passed. And we saw the really obvious exposure of blatantly anti-constitutional activity and war crimes by WikiLeaks. We hear a lot of propaganda from some of the mainstream.
Were doing the war crimes.
No, they were doing the exposure.
And they were exposing.
They were exposing,
which is a crime
they were
in
exposing.
America.
It's not if you don't actually steal the documents.
And he didn't.
No, he didn't. Exactly, that's my point. He didn't. He was not a spy.
He was not the criminal.
He's a journalist.
He's not the
He's
criminal.
being treated like a criminal.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and my point is that there's a whole bunch of people today, there was, over the years, have been dogpiling on Julian Assange and several other whistleblower-type journalists who have exposed these kinds of violations. And they will like poo-poo them and criticize them and want them to get basically killed, if possible, because they're basically making them, the Julian Assanges of the world are making the mainstream media journalists, and I put the word in quotes almost, he makes them look in the mirror, and I think sometimes they don't like what they see. I would hope that they have enough conscience to recognize that. I think some of them have gotten to the point where they don't have any more conscience than the people that they are accepting the paychecks from.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with your diagnosis of their mental condition. I'm not a psychologist, so I won't.
Neither am I.
But I won't judge them in that sense. I say a heck of a lot of them believe they are the saints doing the Lord's work.
Some of them do.
No matter how crazy it is, to believe that, it's kind of a doublethink thing. I don't think doublethink started with Orwell.
No, absolutely.
I think you can believe you're wonderful even while you're committing the most egregious sins. Mm-hmm. And your government can get you to do that, or enough of a bribe or something. Mm-hmm. Well, it was originally my money. Oh, yeah. We've shared this with me because I deserve it, or something. Right. Whatever. Right. Doublethink is not just an Orwellian thing, but it's demanded by an Orwellian state. Mm-hmm. How close are we to an Orwellian state? Well, we're talking about this. We're going to put this on YouTube. We're going to put this. We'll have it will be made into a podcast, mm-hmm. And nobody's. I'm not suspecting hear the knock on the door in the middle of the night. So where are we in that? Some people have said, well, they're actually it's Brave New World type Aldous Huxley state where everything is beautiful.
I think it's more of an issue of that maybe the ideas that both of those people and various other dystopian futurists have come up with over the years are all close to reality, but they haven't quite necessarily materialized. They have, to some degree, in that we are, quite frankly, small potato, and we can say whatever you can still kind of say whatever you want, unless you're big enough to get noticed. And that's why the Matt Taibbis and the Julian Assanges of the world get dogpiled on, because they're big enough to get noticed. And they're big enough to actually have enough people hear them to shake the tree, so to speak. And when that happens, the people in power recognize that there really is at least a slight risk to them. And therefore they will go after the ones who are saying the truth.
Do you know when Assange, they really first started to go after him was the thing he exposed of the killing
in Iraq.
of the helicopter
Yeah,
killing the people.
right.
That was beyond the pale for them. And that's how it snowballed. That's how he got to be noticed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
And-
it's not because he exposed it. Let me rephrase it. It's because he exposed it, not because the people who were doing the killing, weren't wrong, because they were.
Yeah.
And he was right to say that this is wrong. The problem is the ones who are running the show have absolutely no qualms about killing people. That's a big part of the problem.
Getting found out.
We're getting to the point of
But
being
getting-
sociopathic. They're sociopathic in many
Getting
respects.
found out.
And it's not even that they honestly, it's not even they care, because I don't think they fear that they will get
They don't, but they,
end up in the Hague Tribunal or something, because they couldn't care less what they said, what
they're
the
not
law
going,
says.
first of all, they're not going to anyway.
They're not.
But and you raised some good question about why. But that was the thing that really ticked them off.
Yeah.
And why did it tick them off when you think they are, what is their problem with that? Because they're not facing big consequences.
None of them have faced any consequences that I know of.
Absolutely not. So why are they so ticked off at Assange? I mean, there's other people who have, who have exposed stuff.
And many of them got prosecuted too. Some of them got away with it. Some of them
Sure.
had enough public support to stand up and say, "This is the truth. We publish it. This is the truth." Of course, I think a big part of it was, for example, was Daniel Ellsberg, back in the Nixon administration.
But that was in the day when the mainstream media was on his side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference right there, is that the mainstream media has become a lapdog of corporate interests and the government. I mean, it is no longer, we no longer have a truly free media.
Okay.
We have a largely propaganda major media. I think there's some true freedom in the media at the lower levels, but often it is still being more or less suppressed by the fact that they can't get any circulation, and that they're still owned by branches of one giant corporation or another. So it ends up being more of an advertising publicity thing than it is about actual politics. But when you get to the upper levels of the media, they've become pretty much totally Micmac lapdogs. You recognize the reference for that, right?
Military-industrial complex.
Well, it's a what was his name? Was it Ray McGovern, who commented the Micmac military-industrial congressional intelligence
Academic.
media academic think tank complex.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The really
I
long
actually
worded thing.
wrote it in my book. I called it the complex.
Yeah.
It's
It's a lot easier to remember that way.
And do I get any recognition?
No.
Well, so it's a long way from stopping.
Unfortunately.
But they're it's almost a closed circle. Like in that in Wellesley, it's respected. In Dover, it's respected. On Beacon Hill, well, that's right. Out in Brookline, it's loved. Newton, it's loved. Cambridge, it's loved. Parts of Worcester, but not much, and people. I don't, how they can keep outside of that area. I know, like McGovern's from Worcester. How they can keep a McGovern, electing a McGovern, who is just part of that. I mean, I have what he sent to me when I said, why are you supporting this war? And part of it was, let me be clear, I've always been for peace. Well, you got to support Ukraine.
That's contradiction.
But you know what? Well, he was opposed by a character
Yeah.
in the election. Not a bad person, but just somebody who really did, probably supported the war as well.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem, is
But
that there are very
why
few
is there
people
no-
out there who run for office who don't support the war
Well,
and get anywhere.
but I mean, he's so hypocritical about
Yeah.
this. And he's considered a wonderful progressive.
He's better than many of the others out there, but that's not saying much, unfortunately, when you get sucked into the Democratic machine. And he is definitely part of the Democratic
Oh,
machine.
definitely.
And he's been there forever. And
He could
he's,
stop on a dime tomorrow, and if they change whatever policy they'll change, he will turn on a dime. If they came out, think about a really big Republican policy.
Mm-hmm.
If they came out for it, he would adapt.
The problem is, I think the Democrats have adopted a lot of the old school Republican policies. They couch them in quasi-social democratic terminology sometimes. They couch them sometimes in terminology about rights and diversity and other stuff. But in fact, corporate corruption is still corporate corruption. And the fact that they're willing to send more and more military aid to Ukraine and Taiwan and 60 other countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia and various other places, and they're in the middle. We've got our government is currently in the middle of trying sort of to talk down a war between the Turks and the Kurds. Maybe, I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but we shouldn't even be there.
Right. Well,
Or in most of those other places, we shouldn't be there.
I've made that point. You're talking.
Absolutely. We have no reason to be there. We're only there because we're stealing their oil.
In Syria, yeah, that's.
Yeah. Or some resources in some other country. We pick country blank, resource blank. Are we there stealing it? Probably.
Yeah. The only places we don't that are too big to steal it from.
Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly the situation we're seeing in Ukraine right now. Is that we're trying to do it with the Russians, and they're standing up and saying, no, we're not going to let you do that.
Well, I'm at a conflicted point here, because my definition of victory in the Ukraine war is America quitting NATO and coming home. So what is the only thing that will cause that to happen, possibly cause that to happen, will be a collapse of the Ukraine military. And even then it probably wouldn't, because the administration is so crazy. Crazy, you got to be really crazy to make Trump look sane.
Well, this is true.
But
I didn't think they succeeded in making Trump look sane. But
well, I don't think Trump.
You can be different kinds of
crazy. What is crazy? We'll get to that discussion later.
Right.
But they probably would double down after, say, the Ukami collapse. They'd probably double down.
That's part of the risk, I think, that we're seeing right now. We have the Ukrainians keep seeming like every week or so, they're trying to do something else to escalate it. So far, we've had one variant of NATO or other try to talk them down. They don't seem to be all that successful. They keep doing stupid stuff. And we've got a situation where even the only way this war is going to stop in anything that's sane is if we pull the plug and say, we're just not supplying you any more weapons. You people have lost. This war is over. It only keeps going because we keep sending them weapons, and in many respects, we keep sending them troops.
Oh,
they're wearing Ukrainian armor. They're wearing Ukrainian
you heard
uniforms.
About the Polish soldiers that were buried?
I've heard of them, yes. I don't know exactly which countries they're coming from other than that particular situation. But there's rumors that there's a bunch of Poles in there. There's rumors there's a bunch of Romanians in there.
There's Brits.
There's definitely American mercenaries in there.
Yeah.
Well, quite honestly, if there are American mercenaries in the area, they should not be allowed to come home.
Yes.
By definition, they are fighting for somebody who is totally anathema to our way of life,
Well, there are countries that they get away with.
They should not be allowed to come home.
There are countries that we leave them to get away with that.
We shipped them around. There's some evidence, claims anyway, I should say, that we were shipping some of the ISIS terrorists into the Ukraine to fight the war.
I've heard that. I'm not
I don't know if it's
exactly,
true,
I
but I've heard of
don't think
it.
it's necessarily credible. I wouldn't say it's not credible.
Right. I don't know if it is happening,
Yeah.
but I have heard of it.
But that's asking for trouble.
I don't think we've repeatedly done things that logic says would be asking for trouble, and then lo and behold, we get the trouble because that's what blowback is.
Well, think about this for one thing. Like, if we had never backed the Taliban, never backed the Taliban, there would not have been a 9/11.
Probably not.
And you know, what's his name? Brzezinski. Oh, it was a great thing. What do you mean that wasn't a great idea? That was a wonderful idea because he is less an American citizen. He's an American citizen,
Yeah.
but he's a Polish aristocrat. And he was for Poland.
Yeah,
He wasn't
largely.
He was for America, but he was as much for Poland.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help the fact that we have a lot of the people who are making decisions in the upper echelons of NATO and the EU, and somewhat to some degree in our foreign policy apparatus, that have direct ties to several of those Eastern European countries.
Well, this is
And the problem is that we've got a situation here where I think common sense says what are their actual intentions?
And
Are they
and
representing the
loyalties.
United States, or are they representing their years
When
of
we write the next
mental
Constitution.
ideology
when we write the
supporting
next Constitution,
who their enemies are?
I am going to put in, because I'm going to be, the guy who does it, that you do not get to be doing any foreign policy of a country your ancestors came from recently. Now, let me tell you, I would love to be appointed to as ambassador to a country just across the pond. And I'd love to be there living in the what do you call it, the ambassador's residence. I'd love to be hobnobbing with all the people, lunch at the Gresham. I think you can tell which country I'm talking about.
Ireland, yeah.
I don't think it should happen. I should be banned from having anything to do diplomatically, whether I'm an employee of the Foreign Service or whatever, with Ireland. I think
Okay, we'll make you ambassador to Somalia.
to Somalia, I would take it as a challenge.
Of course, a country there would be a challenge, all right, because
would take it as a challenge.
Somalia basically doesn't exist as a
But,
country.
And Brzezinski, when he signed up for the Foreign Service, he said, you can have nothing to do with Poland. Absolutely nothing to do with Poland.
It's kind of a catch-22 because I can understand wanting to have somebody in those areas that have some experience with the country, speak the language, and that kind of stuff. But our foreign service is not really good at keeping people who develop those kinds of experiences in areas where they're actually helpful.
Well, we got
From what I understand.
You got a good or evil. The worse, the better, the lesser evil. Keep them out.
It probably
Keep 'em
is.
out.
Train people who are good at languages to speak the language, send them in there and have them rise from the bottom.
I mean, I could learn Mongolian if I had to.
Yeah, probably.
Started
Naturally.
young enough.
We'll just have one of those. We'll have one of Elon Musk's Neuralinks plugged into your brain and you'll learn Mongolian that way.
That will do. I mean, I think Asimov had one of those charts, one of his stories.
Probably.
You could, you put the thing in your brain and that stuff. Well, our friends in the upper echelon of this organization want us to more or less cease and desist. So, thank you, Gus, and we'll see you next month. This has been the Long Hill Report. This is Richard Morco, and we want to thank Drew Anderson, our commanding officer over there.
Happy Kwanzaa to everyone.